We got a question from one of our listeners asking, would you recommend any special form of prayer?
That's a good question.
It is, right. And it got me thinking because there are so many different approaches to prayer out there. Like, where do we even begin?
Right. Like, should we be doing this type of prayer or that type of prayer?
Exactly. So maybe instead of getting bogged down in all the specific forms or formulas or methods, maybe we could look at it from like a different angle.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Where do you want to go with this?
Well, I often hear people talk about like praying in the Spirit, but I'm going to be honest with you, it's always seemed a bit mysterious to me.
Yeah, I can see that. It's definitely one of those things that we should dive into a little bit deeper.
For sure.
Essentially what we're talking about here is surrendering our preconceived notions of how prayer should be, letting go of that control.
Oh, okay.
Instead, allowing ourselves to be led by the Holy Spirit.
I see. So kind of like being open to a power bigger than ourselves during prayer.
That's one way to put it. Think of it like a dance.
Okay.
When you're dancing, you're not always the one leading. Sometimes you let your partner lead.
Yeah.
So it's the same with prayer, We don't always have to be in control. Sometimes we can let the Holy Spirit guide us.
Okay. I think I'm starting to get it. So it's less about like having that memorized script or the perfect words.
Yeah.
And more about being open to like, what exactly, how does this guidance, how does this letting go, how does it actually work?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting because it's different for everyone.
Okay.
But often it involves like a sense of deep inner knowing, a feeling of just peace or clarity, or sometimes even specific words or phrases will come to you.
Wow.
And they'll just come from a place beyond your conscious mind, almost like your thoughts are gently being shaped.
Okay, yeah.
And aligned with the higher will.
That makes me think of all those times I've struggled to pray,
Oh.
feeling like I don't even know what words to use. Could this praying in the Spirit be a way to kind of overcome that feeling of helplessness?
I think so. There's that passage in Romans that I think really gets at this. It says, we do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us through wordless groans.
I like that, wordless groan.
Right. It's acknowledging that we don't always have the answers.
Yeah.
But we're also not alone in that struggle.
So instead of getting, like you said, bogged down in finding the perfect words or the method, we could just trust that the Holy Spirit's going to be there to kind of guide us along the way.
Exactly. Even in those moments when we just feel completely lost.
Yeah.
It's like having a divine prayer partner.
Ooh, I like that.
Helping us find the words to say, to articulate what we really want to say, even if we don't know the words ourselves.
And the deepest desires of our heart. Wow.
Exactly. And the more we practice this, the more we surrender to that guidance, the closer our connection to God gets. It becomes less about asking for things and more about just being in the flow of God's will.
That's powerful. It's like instead of trying to force our will, we're trying to harmonize with something way bigger.
Exactly.
So to answer our listener's question, would you recommend any special form of prayer? Maybe the most special form of prayer isn't about any particular form at all.
Right.
But about the posture of our hearts.
Yeah.
Being willing to listen, be guided. And just trust in the power of the Holy Spirit.
Beautifully said. I love that. And, this doesn't mean that other forms of prayer are wrong.
True, yeah.
Liturgical prayers, contemplative practices, even just asking for things. Those all have their place, but maybe if we can incorporate this element of surrender, this openness to the Spirit, it can make any form of prayer more powerful.
It's like adding another dimension to our prayer, a richness and depth that we wouldn't have otherwise.
Totally.
Who knows? Maybe that's where the real magic of prayer lies. Letting go.
I think you might be right.
What do you think our listeners can do to let go and allow the Holy Spirit to guide their prayer lives?
That's a great question for all of us to think about this week.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And thank you to our listeners for sending in your questions. Keep them coming, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.